Welcome to this episode of End of Life Conversations. I'm Reverend Wakil David Matthews.
And I'm the Reverend Mother, Ana Luisa Armendariz. In this podcast, we share people's experiences with death and dying, grief and loss, and the end of life.
Every episode, we are so honored and blessed to share stories with amazing, compassionate, and wise guests. So let's get started.
Welcome, listeners. Episode 32. We are hosting a lovely, intimate interview with Seth Viddal. Seth has been an entrepreneur for most of his adult life. After serving in the Air Force during Operation Desert Shield, he designed and sold communication solutions for government intelligence agencies. Following the unexpected deaths of both of his parents and a younger brother, Seth was called to explore alternatives to conventional funeral services. In 2017, he sold his companies and went back to school at Naropa University in Boulder, Colorado. He helped open the doors to the natural funeral in Boulder County in 2019. They have since opened a second funeral home and a care center in Denver, Colorado, where they perform ecological dispositions.
Yes, Seth and the Natural Funeral are transforming the funeral industry. They have expanded end-of-life care options available to Coloradans by bringing water cremation and terramation to the state. The Natural Funeral hosted the inaugural Body Composting Conference in Denver in March 2023, which was the first global initiative to connect researchers, funeral professionals, legislators, mortuary science students, end-of-life caregivers, universities, and composting professionals.
Yeah.
It's really exciting. We had one of those here in the Seattle area last year, and there's another one coming up, so that we're hoping to participate in. So great to have you, Seth. Thanks so
Welcome,
much for
Seth.
joining us.
It's good to be here. Thank you.
Yeah. So I don't know. Are you planning to come out to Seattle for the one that's out here?
I'll be there. I was there for the one TerraCon in earlier this year, and I've already been invited to be on some panels for the one next year. So I'll be there as a panelist and also learning about the emerging trends in the industry.
It's so great that they're doing that. Ana Luisa and I are hoping we could maybe set up a little sound booth and do interviews for the podcast there. We still haven't figured out if that's going to work. We always like to begin with, when did you first become aware of death?
I first became aware of death when I attended the funeral for my Aunt Zulma. And my Aunt Zulma was an unofficial family member. She taught me my ABCs and didn't have children of her own and was kind of adopted by my family. And I was very young when she died, about 6 or 7 years old. And it was the first funeral I was allowed to attend. And I remember that being special because I'd been kept away from other funerals before, kind of at arm's length. You don't necessarily let the kids know about all this mortality stuff happening at funerals. And so that was my first exposure. It really was my first example of how outsourced, how involved the professionals were with the service they were providing to our family.
Well, and I hope it got recorded, the part we were talking about the trend toward natural funerals, and I hope we'll certainly be talking more about that. So thank you.
Yeah, so kind of using that experience as a springboard for who you are in this time, in this space, tell me how death has impacted your story.
Well, I love using that as a jumping off point, and it's not a story that I get to share frequently because in my current snapshot of what a funeral can be, I realized that my early exposure, it was there, and it actually installed some limiting beliefs in me. And those beliefs were that the professionals handled the care of our family member, and that there was sort of this limited selection that you sought out from a funeral home. It was either burial or cremation, and you generally went with whatever the trend of your family's behaviors were, meaning you're either generally a burial family or a cremation family. And so oftentimes the only thing you're there to select is when is the visitation and what color casket do you
Right.
want.
Mm-hmm.
And so as a kid, that was my first experience. And then I got the chance to go to additional funerals after that. And some I was kept away from because kids weren't welcome at all of the funerals. And so what that's manifest as today is in the mid 20 teens, in 2014, 15, and 16, I was a funeral customer when my dad died unexpectedly. And then a year later, my little brother died unexpectedly. And then about exactly a year later, my mother died unexpectedly. And I went back to the same funeral home. In fact, the one that had served my Aunt Zulma when I was a kid all those years
Wow.
before. Because that's what you do. The family
Mhm.
just, you pick up the phone and you call the funeral home that you used last
Yeah.
time, and you probably buy a similar service to what you got for the last person in your family.
Mm-hmm.
And when that happened over and over with my father and brother and mother, something in me broke because it felt so disconnected from what was actually possible. And it felt detached from the values that each of them had led throughout their lives. So basically, my little brother got the same funeral my grandpa got, just a few decades later.
Mm-hmm.
And so what this has manifested in me today is a passion for empowering families to have something, a choice that's really connected to their values and who they are. And I like to be a resource in our community. And so we make it a point to work with local providers and local materials, and to really, the third sort of emphasis that we bring to funeral service is our ecological impact. And so we're trying to make a difference in families' lives while still preserving a light footprint of touch on the earth.
So important. So thank you. That's so good to hear that.
Well, and that's a value too, right? Like the
Absolutely.
ecological piece. It's a value that our grandparents weren't really considering, in part because they weren't being embalmed and there wasn't too much. It was just like you just go do it. But so many more people right now are ecologically aware of the footprint continues even after, actually walking on the planet. Now you're laying in the planet. Like what is it? So yeah, so I really appreciate that. That's that you're naming it and you're making space for it.
Right.
Thanks, Ana Luisa. Yeah, I really believe that our bodies are made out of the stardust that we borrow when we incarnate in our forms here. And that was loaned to us from the previous generations and from Mother Earth's body herself. And so it really does make sense when we realize that at the heart of who we are, beneath our name and beneath our physical form, our identity at its scientific level is the same building blocks of nitrogen and phosphorus and potassium and calcium that every living being builds its body out of. And so to recognize our place in the nature of all things and the cycle of life really lends us towards being able to offer our bodies back to that connection from which we came.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
That connection that is always existing. So remembering that connection is part of remembering that connection is to take that connection to the end, at our ending. Let's make sure we complete the connection. Yeah. So good. So important. Thank you.
It shows up in such special ways to people's plans that they're considering for themselves. I have the good fortune of helping hundreds of families each year, and some of them are elders that have had plans in place for decades, and some of them are young people who never expected to be considering their own mortality. But when we sit down with them and we light a candle and we ask them about how they live their life, and when folks start describing a relationship with nature and the outdoors and plants and gardening, or maybe it was important to them that they respected the earth, and they might have put solar panels on their house or driven a hybrid car, and they say, I really don't want my last act here as a person who's been intentional in relationship with life and beauty. I don't want my last act to be harmful to that system. And so people actually find joy and relief in the options that we're able to give them when they think about what they'll become in the future.
Oh, that's so great. So important. So tell us a little more about the current role that you have and the work that you're doing.
Yeah, thanks. So the Natural Funeral is the organization that I'm a part of. We opened our very first office about 5 years ago. And because of this approach that we take with families, a really inclusive invitation for them to share with us about who they are and what's important to them. And because we've offered this range of ecological options, we've experienced a pretty rapid growth to where we now have 3 offices serving Colorado, and within the next 6 months have plans to begin offering ecological services out of state.
Wow.
So the evolution of the funeral service side is growing quite rapidly. And it's interesting because the funeral industry has historically been very slow to react or embrace to change. You might consider that we've been, burying our bodies for thousands of years in a very natural way, and we've commodified that process now to envelope our bodies in maybe precious metals in a casket or in a vault that's going to even protect that casket. There's been this commodification of that process. And so we're finding that people really can express joy when they can step out of that system and dream into what might become of their body.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, that's the work you're doing now, and that sounds so good. I'm so glad that that's expanding and becoming more available. I know here in Washington State, where I live, it's becoming much more available, and we just signed up. My wife and I just signed up to make sure we get our bodies composted, and so
Wonderful, Joaquin. Congratulations and welcome to the peace of mind
yeah,
that
yeah,
often brings to people when they're able to not focus on what's going to happen when they die, but redirect that energy to the beauty of their living
yeah. That's right.
experience.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I'd love to share with you a little bit about some of the technical advances in ecological death care and the evolution of that. If I may, you hinted to one of the processes there, Wakil, that resonated with you. Folks call it either natural organic reduction or body composting, or we call it terramation, but
Mm-hmm.
it's the gentle and gradual biological conversion of our bodies back into soil. So when we do a green or natural burial, the type that we've done for thousands of years, well before there was a funeral industry, that would be how we had returned bodies to the earth. And that option has long prevailed. But the process of terramation recognizes that we're a more nomadic culture. We're not necessarily born and die in the same town that our parents and their parents were born and died in, because we're a global economy and we have internet connectivity. We can kind of live and act and work wherever we want to on the planet. And it really makes the reality of visiting a grave on birthdays and for picnics less of a reality than it was at a point in our past. And because of that, people still want to do what's right and or what makes logical sense to them. And if that's for their body to be ashes to ashes, dust to dust, and brought back into the earth, burial makes sense. But we can accomplish that now without actually taking up forever a piece of real estate that is watered and mowed and manicured, and instead our body can go back to the same soil from which we came, but can be distributed, can
Yeah.
be can then be gifted to where the planet can most use the form of our body. And so rather than being in a mowed and watered lawn, what might happen with a natural funeral customer, or the Seattle firms are doing a real similar act of love, which is that the soil that our bodies are converted into, are intentionally dispersed as gifts for agricultural projects, land restoration efforts, for reforestation projects where pastures have been overgrazed. So our body is actually making an impact in the cycle of life. And there's another technology that we also offer. It's a funeral service option, and it resonates with some people. It's called water cremation. It's also known as alkaline hydrolysis. And this is more of a rapid process, more akin to conventional fire cremation that most of your audience would be very familiar with. It's a couple of hour process. The family gets back an urn that they can scatter those remains or bury them or memorialize them somewhere. So similarly, a water cremation is a several hour process, but rather than using fire as the change agent that we apply to the body, we use water and alkaline compounds. And what that does is it uses very little energy in the process. And rather than our bodies being converted to gas, which go out a chimney in the form of pollution or waste, our bodies are captured and the essence of ourself is maintained through that process. And what that means is, rather than going out a smokestack, our body can be taken to a farm and applied to a field or a pasture in the form of a giving biostimulant. So rather than being a consumptive and sort of polluting process, where it's an energy efficient process that returns us to nature.
Yeah, that's really nice.
Yeah.
You mentioned the time that it takes for the aquamation and so how long does the terramation, how long does that usually take?
The water cremation process, like flame cremation, is a few hours. And the terramation process, because it's a living process of biology, takes a couple of months. Our process takes between 2 and 3 months to complete.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's a much less sudden process. In fact, it's a living process of biology. And this all takes place in our system in a chrysalis vessel inside of a controlled, climate secure warehouse, which is similar to the Seattle operators, where they use a vessel in a controlled environment. Yeah, it's a pretty special way to intend your body.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing that details. That's really important. It's helpful.
It is helpful. And I really appreciate that these conversations around the choices we have about our bodies after life are starting to kind of crop up in different states, like Washington. Wakil's got some folks there too. And one thing I just want to point out too, that I did do a walk through the warehouse here in Denver. And I appreciated that Seth told us that once a month, families can come in and just hold vigil with their loved ones who are in what would you call it? Like in stasis, like that, like they're composting.
That's right. That's right. They're in the chrysalis vessels, and on the last Friday of each month, we do host a tour where families can come. Sometimes it's folks who are curious about this for themselves. They've heard about it and they want some more information. Sometimes it's folks in the hospice or medical community who want to just educate themselves so they can share about this with families. And sometimes it's loved ones who have a person in one of our chrysalis vessels there who want to spend that time being with their loved one. And they often share with the families who are considering this for themselves, and their hearts open into just beautiful stories.
Mm-hmm. I really love that.
Yeah.
So it sounds like a lot of really good work is bringing this good work into people's lives. But what are your challenges in this processes that you're gifting us as choices?
Well, The challenges really are the obscurity of these options at this point. So there are 22,000 funeral homes in the United States, and it's a $20 billion a year industry serving more than 3 million deaths in this country. And there are 4 funeral homes that I'm aware of who are Terramation providers, right? So we're really just in the early moments of society at large, even coming to know that these options exist. But ahead of that, there's a legislative, not battle, but effort, I'll say, to be faced, which is to make it legally an option in a lot of states for these technologies to exist. So alkaline hydrolysis is currently legal in 28 states, but it's only offered in about 12 or 13 of them. There just aren't even providers yet who are doing that. And terramation, or natural organic reduction, is currently legal in 12 states. And that's very exciting to me because Colorado was the second state to legalize natural organic reduction. It became an effective part of our laws in September of 2021. And so, in that short amount of time, from September of 2021, we're recording in July of 24, 10 more states have passed laws allowing this. But the operators haven't yet caught up with providing the services in those areas. So I think getting the word out, and you all's podcast, every conversation you have at End of Life Conversations brings this topic of our mortality to the forefront of the people who listen. And so as people become educated about these options, and they may or may not resonate with them, but they'll know that it exists, and they might advocate for that in their communities. That would be a way that your group of listeners could contribute to the efforts to get this available in more places.
I just had a quick thought, Seth, because this is what I'm experiencing right now. But could we ever do pets in these processes?
What a great question. And it's interesting because the stories that I shared with you about my father's passing and mother's passing and my little brother's passing, even my Aunt Zulma for that matter, they were all sweet, sweet stories. But the deaths in my life that have impacted me the most, like the proverbial frying pan over the head, it really knocked the wind out of my sails, have been the deaths of my most beloved pets, because they shared living space, even sleeping space and eating space at every meal, and are such a dear part of our lives that we get that call very frequently, Ana Luisa, to help people who love their pets dearly. And I'm grateful that there are operators out there who are working on emerging answers to that with terramation and water cremation. It's not an immediate plan for my firm, but I regularly get to coach and talk with people who are considering this option for pets. And I wholeheartedly endorse that the American consumer is ready for that.
Yeah. I don't know if you remember, Ana Luisa, but Bree from Return Home said they had just started.
That's right.
Doing
That's right.
They do. Yeah, my friends in Seattle or Auburn, Washington at Return Home, they did open a pet division, not at their same facility, but certainly based on the technology that they've learned implementing this with people.
Yeah,
I love that.
So yeah, that's so great. What a good question. What a good thing to know that that's happening. So you kind of spoke a little bit about what helps you feel supported, but we're also wondering, like, the things about, supporting yourself in this work. You mentioned when we were first starting that you had just gone through something that really kind of opened your heart up, and so just what helps you feel supported?
Yeah, well, we have an amazing team that I get to work with, and we kind of have a motto or a saying that we share amongst our team, especially in really tender times. And that phrase that we use with each other is just a reminder, and we share with each other, we are the families that we serve. And
Mm.
there's not a disconnect between us and them, the families that we're privileged enough to come into community with. And honestly, over time, several of us have been clients of our own service with the loss of parents, right?
Yeah.
I have team members who we've served, friends and family of our own team. So recognizing that there's really no boundary or barrier between the emotions that we're getting to come into relationship with in our community and each other. And that's a really helpful way to approach each day. And then the clients that we have come to us, they validate that by the conversations that we have. There's another term we use at the natural funeral, which is it describes that privilege. And we call the term unearned intimacy. And it is the gift of a family coming to us on what may be one of the most difficult days of their entire lives. And they haven't had time to catch their breath. Nothing is censored in their conversation. It is just raw communication that they share with us because they need help in this moment. And
Yeah.
that is a sacred privilege. I'll share with your group, your listeners here, that immediately preceding our conversation, I had the privilege of sitting down with a family deciding that there's a 17-year-old in the family with a terminal illness. And we got to have a really sweet conversation about what would be meaningful to that young lady at the near term demise of her physical body. And it is resourceful to us and it is empowering to us and actually adds to our energy when you can watch a light go on in someone's head or heart as they finally received an option that is meaningful to them. And so I'm answering this, Wakil, by way of saying the team, our coworkers feed us, and the families who come in and allow us the privilege of experiencing something really difficult with them. That's actually very empowering to us.
Wow.
Wow. Yeah, that's a really, really beautiful perspective and kind of unique in a way from some. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. So, Seth, what frightens you about the end of your life?
Well, I'm a little bit of a control freak, so not knowing when it's going to happen is a little bit unnerving to me. It's interesting. I get really sweet, deep conversations with folks a lot, and one of the ponderances that people have is, if you could know when your death was going to occur, would you want to? Because it might change
Right.
the way we live and act for the better or for the worse. And so people have real varied takes on that question. I'm in the bucket that I would want to know. so that freaks me out a little, but I don't want to be. I don't want to overstate my preparedness and acceptance, but when you have the privilege of hearing hundreds, I guess maybe at this point, even thousands of stories from families, you really realize that death is a part of living and that it's actually kind of what makes living so great is that if it went on forever, there'd be no urgency in creating beauty in this day because I could always just get to it
Yeah.
tomorrow. And so while I don't want to say I'm approaching death with joy, I've already shared with you, it freaks me out. I don't know when it's coming, but the fact that it's coming has enabled me to show up with a new attitude towards each day. And I hope that I appreciate that your podcast attempts to bring this conversation into our living day because I really think it makes our days better. So to answer your question, death makes my life better.
Beautiful.
It sure does. It sure does. Yeah, that's exactly why we're doing this. Yeah. That's really well done, really well said. In a way, I think we've kind of touched on the last couple questions about, being supported and resourced. Sounds like you have a good team that
Mhm.
helps you resource yourself. Are there any other practices that you'd want to share with us that you and your team use to resource yourself or to work through the fears that you might have?
Yeah, so we come together as a team outside of the needs of work on a regular basis, where we connect and we don't discuss the practical steps of serving families each day, but we really do check-ins with each other. We have a non-denominational chaplain that attends a monthly gathering where we light a candle and folks are invited to share and bring their pearls, but also bring their burdens and share that experience with our team so that we each kind of know the vibration in each other's lives and what we're each going through. And we really honor that collectively we are each other's gift and each other's way to serve our community in the way that we want to. So we honor each other. I think that taking the time to do that has made our organization stronger, and it makes us a little bit unique.
Mhm.
Yeah, I would say so. And the fact that it's like you're almost bringing ritual into the connection with
Mhm.
each other, making that a ritual that you do together. And we've spoken about ritual often on this podcast and how important it can
Mhm.
Yeah.
be. So,
Wakil, I guess since you brought up ritual, I think that it's important to know that aside from just what we do with our bodies, that's obviously a very important consideration as families are taking these steps through grief. And so I would encourage your listeners too to be real creative in what ritual at end of life means to them, because you don't just have to defer or default to the wishes of your local funeral director. If being with the body or having a loving washing ritual of the body by the family is important, then I would just advocate for your group to bring that ritual in and honor that.
mm,
Mhm.
yeah,
Mhm.
thank you. Yeah, and Ana Luisa is an expert. She helps people create
Yeah,
rituals, so
my favorite.
uh, it's very important. Yeah,
So
yeah.
beautiful. The last question, I guess, Wakil, I'll throw this out there, but what do you wish we had asked you?
Such a good question. You know what? I think I've listened to most of the episodes of your podcast and I've heard the types of conversations that you have. And I knew that question was coming. And with no regrets, I feel whole and complete. And I feel a bunch of gratitude toward the way
Mhm.
that you all
Mm,
are inviting these conversations. So
Mm.
you've left
mm.
nothing unsaid, and my heart is thankful.
Oh, I
Oh,
love
thank you,
that.
Seth. That's
Yes.
great.
Well, now's the precious time when we ask folks to read a poem for us. And what you got?
Good. Well, only my favorite poem ever. There's a very lightly published poem by Sister Carol Bylock, and it's called Breathing Underwater. And this poem has meant a lot to me, and I am grateful to get to share it with your listeners. It says, I built my house by the sea, not on the sands, mind you, not on the shifting sand. And I built it of rock, a strong house by a strong sea. And we got well acquainted, the sea and I, good neighbors. Not that we spoke much, we met in silences, respectful, keeping our distance, but looking our thoughts across the fence of sand. Always the fence of sand, our barrier, always the sand between. And then one day, and I still don't know how it happened, the sea came without warning, without welcome even. Not sudden and swift, but a shifting across the sand like wine, less like the flow of water than the flow of blood. Slow but coming, slow but flowing like an open wound. And I thought of flight, and I thought of drowning, and I thought of death. And while I thought, the sea crept higher, until it reached my door. And I knew then that there was neither flight, nor death, nor drowning. That when the sea comes calling, you stop being neighbors, well acquainted, friendly, at a distance neighbors, and you give your house for a coral castle, and you learn to breathe underwater.
Wow.
Whoa, that's
Oh,
so beautiful. I hope you could please send us a copy of that, so we'll include it in the
yes.
I'd
podcast notes.
love to. It's meant a lot to me throughout about the 15 years that poem's been a part of my life. And thank you for letting me share it with you today.
That is such a gift.
Very beautiful. Yeah. We will also add any other links you'd like to your organization or any books or whatever else you'd like to send us. We'll put those in the podcast notes. But we thank you so much again, Seth, for making it and for coming back, even though the first try didn't work.
Thank you, Ana Luisa and Joaquil, for having important end-of-life conversations.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Thanks so much.
Thanks so much for joining us on the End of Life Conversations. We appreciate you and look forward to sharing our stories. Thanks to my daughter Lucero and Nico Rush, who have cheerfully assisted us as our editors and tech support. Additional resources, transcript of this episode, and links to our social media will be in the podcast notes.
Yeah, thank you so much. And please subscribe, tell your friends, follow us on social media, and consider supporting us through Patreon. We want to acknowledge that the music we are using was composed and produced by Charles Heastand.